Why are the Victor skins looking like downgrades from the old version? People are mad that the new version looks skinnier. Um, so the new version is going to represent like whatever version of Victor is, the accurate version of him, right? Which is a skinnier type of dude. So if you're like, I wanted bulky man and you made skinny man, I would say like, I understand that you might prefer bulky man, but like, you know, the Victor is not bulky man, right? So, so there's that to talk about. In terms of like, are the skins better? Are they worse? Are they upgrades? Are they downgrades? I can't really speak to it. I'm not on the team. I haven't been working for a while. I will always caution the the statement that like everyone is really mad about this thing. And what I mean by that is like basically when you go into internet echo chambers like places like Reddit, you often get a very biased and very skewed opinion of things because the people who like stuff don't tend to post about it. They tend to just go like and enjoy the stuff, whereas the people who don't like stuff tend to, post about it a lot. And so you get this risk of like echo chambers, vocal minorities, things like that. And so, like as an example of this, one of the cautions I give every designer when working on a rework, and I learned this myself, is when you're working on a rework, be very, very careful of the champion main subreddits of the champion you're reworking. And the reason for that is that champion main subreddit has a very biased sample size of people who probably really, really, really like the exact thing that is in the game. And that doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean they have bad taste or anything like that. It just means like they have a specific preference, which is the exact thing that is in the game. And it turns out that when you're reworking a character, the exact thing that's in the game is usually not the target for why you're reworking the character. And so it's easy to get specific biased types of opinions by looking at certain things like, say, a subreddit, things like that. And so, anyways, I can't like speak exactly to like, quality or things like that. Is this good? Is this bad? Again, I'm not working right now. I don't know. But mainly just if you're talking about it and thinking about it, one of the things that we at Riot often do is we try to look at the entire player base. And when I say entire player base, I mean potentially that could mean, the entire player base of League of Legends, but also the entire player base for a champion, right? So as an example, when I was working on Morgana, if you went to the Morgana main subreddit, they asked about a lot of things like, hey, I want better auto attacks. Hey, I want a new W. Hey, I want a new passive. But then when I went and looked at the overall player base of Morgana, there's actually a very different opinion, which was, hey, actually, we really like Morgana the way she is. And here's some things that I can improve her, but we actually don't want a new passive. We like our current passive. We don't want really good auto attacks because that's not where we're playing her, things like that. And so that's an example of like, depending on who you asked about Morgana back then, you would have got very different opinions. And the entire Morgana player base actually had a very different opinion than like, say, like the Reddit Morgana mains player base. And so that's always something worth thinking about when you're looking at like, online discourse about characters, is, okay, here's someone who has opinion A, right? Okay, what's the validity of that opinion? What's good about it? What's bad about it? How real is it? Things like that. And then, but hey, what is potentially the person who has a different opinion, and are they going to be posting about it? Where are they going to be posting? Things about that. And sorry, I'll cap this off with like, the reason I'm bringing up this is I'm not trying to like gaslight you. I'm not trying to be like a Rito apologist. Like everything Riot does is good or bad. Again, not commenting on that, but more commenting on like, as an example, one of the characters you see get a lot of like, you saw historically, less today, but historically, we're talking like 10 years ago, get a lot of like online hate was Yasuo. And that's because he's legitimately frustrating to a number of players, right? Like, I'm not saying Yasuo isn't frustrating, but like if you went online, you'd often see like, wow, people really don't like Yasuo. I've already told the story about how like that's actually different depending on what region you're in. Like people don't mind Yasuo nearly as much in China and Korea. But the other thing to note is Yasuo, while getting all this like flame, was also at the time the most popular champion in League of Legends, right? And the reason I'm bringing that up is like, yes, there was a number of people who didn't seem to like Yasuo, but there's also a number of people who really, 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 really liked Yasuo. So, and like you see that actually a lot with mobility, where like whenever we make a mobile character, a number of online places will be like, Riot makes another mobile character, League of Legends is ruined. Whenever we make a character with multiple spells, Riot makes Hui, League is ruined. You get a lot of negativity. You get a lot of outflowing of new thing bad. But then in a lot of cases, like those mobile characters end up being like characters that a lot of people really love playing. And, Hui ended up being like a pretty successful mage, I would argue, that didn't end up being as crazy. And so, yeah, sorry. I've kind of gone on a little rant about it, but the TLDR for you is I tend to be very, very skeptical of certain types of feedback from internet forums, given that I know that they don't necessarily capture the overall player base of the game or even the individual character. And so the question for me will often be like, hey, is something good or bad? That's a great question to ask. Is this skin change good or bad? Is this champion change good or bad? Is this preseason good or bad? Things like that. That's great to ask. But the dominant voices you hear on a place like Reddit might not always be indicative of how players of the game and overall are feeling about it. Varus has no hard CC and no ability at all. He has a root in the ult and that's it. Shouldn't he get another CC? Igor, I wonder if you're trolling me. You just came in and asked, Varus has no hard CC, and then listed the hard CC that Varus has. I'm sorry, and I get what you're asking, right? It's like, is the ult enough? Yes, the ult is enough. For an AD carry to have a hard crowd control on their kit, as reliable as Varus's, even if it's on an ult level cooldown, is immensely powerful. So if we're talking about Varus feeling weak, that's a reasonable thing to talk about. Usually the reason Varus feels weak is because he's in pro jail. We typically have to nerf him for pro play, every number of months. So he's a constant ping pong between OP and pro and not, and like that's always a thing we have to think about. But I would not say that like you should describe this character as someone who has no hard CC, because he actually has an incredibly powerful hard CC. And so yeah, I would not be like that's the reason he is weak. I'd be like, if I was to describe reasons Varus is weak, it's like we have to make him weak sometimes because pros are good at him when he's strong. So I would argue that Varus's weaknesses when he has them are not indicative of kit deficiencies. The idea that like, oh, he doesn't have enough mobility, he doesn't have enough crowd control, things like that. I actually think they're indicative of the opposite, which is kit does too much. And so because his kit does too much, he tends to, when viable enough, be very powerful in the hands of the best players in the game. And so if I was asking about Varus, I would personally maybe go on the path of, instead of being like, he doesn't do enough in his kit, where can we add something? I would personally go down the path of, perhaps he has too many different strengths on his kit, where can we subtract? The idea of subtracting being that then you can add to the other strengths that you didn't subtract from and end up with a character who's maybe in the long term stronger without having to be, nerfed every, X months for pro. His ult isn't like Ashe's ult. They can still auto attack and use skills. Yes, but it is still hard CC. Just because they can fight back does not make it weak. Because oftentimes the inability to move is hard crowd control. I'm actually going to give you an example, not of Varus, but of something else. Years and years and years ago, we removed silences from a number of assassins. We moved from Kassadin, Talon, LeBlanc. And the reason we did this is because even though a silence technically isn't hard CC, you can still move. It might as well have been on these assassin patterns, because they jump on you, they prevent your ability to use spells, and yeah, you can run away, But if you're running away from an assassin and not doing anything and can't dash and things like that, a lot of situations you're already dead, right? And so you can apply that kind of logic to a lot of different types of CC and like roots as an example. Are roots weaker than stuns? 100%. The ability to fight back is a big difference than a stun which says you can't fight back. But when you consider, especially for a ranged champion like Varus, when they're using these roots, in a lot of cases, they might as well be hard CCs. Obviously, Ashe can still ult you when you ult her, like, yes. But like, a number of the times that Varus roots you, the thing you want to do is not fight back. The thing you want to do is leave, and you can't. A number of times when Varus roots you, the thing you want to do is fight back, but you're a melee champion, and so you can't, because he leaves, right? And so, roots are like, just really, really, really strong, especially on AD carries. Not as strong as stuns, of course, but one of the reasons we give these AD carries roots instead of stuns, as an example, Senna has one, Jhin has one, as examples of characters I worked on. Fun fact, Jin's W used to be a stun, Senna's W used to be a stun. I tested both of those spells as stuns, and every single time I tested them as stuns, I found out that like, oh, actually, this is just completely broken. Because what's way less fair against a range AD carry who has immobilized you is not being able to fight back at the same time. So, yeah.